always... there you are. Fantastic.
Yay, here we are. I haven't done one of these, like a partner Instagram live. It's awesome. Thank you, Kia.
You're so welcome. I know it kind of squashes our faces a little bit, but here we are.
After all our yoga, we get to, right?
I know. Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
Wow. All right, everyone. I'm going to actually read a little bio on Maggie. I could introduce her just without it, but I think there's always things that one misses because I'm going to introduce her as I know her as a dedicated yoga student and deep self-investigator, and also somebody who is deeply maybe concerned is one way to put it, but who cares deeply about the world and how we're all interacting in the world. So that's my experience. That's a little section of my experience of you, Maggie, but here it goes. So Maggie Ostara, PhD, left her prestigious job as the Director of Women's and Gender Studies at Columbia University when she realized she's not meant to work for anyone else. And Maggie shares part of human design in her book. And I guess you learned that, and then that was it for you. She's a multiply published #1 Amazon bestselling author, an incredible speaker, teacher, intuitive and skilled mentor, coach. And she's the creator of the 8 pillars of feminine sovereignty, the 6 feminine sovereign archetypes, and over 20 educational programs founded on spiritual growth and building soul-inspired businesses that positively impact the world. So today we're here to talk about your latest book that I think is just launching, called Feminine Sovereignty. So welcome, Maggie.
Thank you, Kia. It's a delight, a total delight to be here with you. And welcome to everybody who's tuning in live and who may see this later. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad to get to connect with you today.
Yes. So Maggie, tell us a little bit about what inspired this book for you.
Well, this book has been, I first was introduced to the idea of sovereignty as something that I could apply to myself back in 1998. And that was before anybody else was really kind of talking about it. And I was working with this shamanic practitioner, and she started talking to me, and she was talking about energetic sovereignty at that point, because, a lot of shamanic people, they see different things in the different dimensions. And so she was just talking about how significant it is for us to have our energetic sovereignty. We don't want entities in our field and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's what she was talking about. And I just was really captivated by this idea of sovereignty. I was like, what is that? How do we do that? That's not just for queens and kings, right? Yeah. So that started like 25 years ago now. And so when I started really doing a lot of mentoring and working with clients, I was like, yeah, let's really look at how do we create sovereignty? What is sovereignty and how do we create it? And in the book now, there's Kundalini yoga and the influence of radiant body yoga. It's all through the book because it's such a key foundational practice for us to build our energetic sovereignty. Right. And we here in the West, we don't know that much about energy when it comes to us as people. We think of it as, what powers our lights or powers our cars or whatever. And people like you, Kia, and the people that you have learned from, your teachers who have brought this incredible wisdom from India and from Asia have benefited us so much. And so I first really kind of got tuned into energy back when I was living in New York when I was still teaching at Columbia, and I went to somebody who did Chinese and Tibetan medicine. And there's a funny story, it's in the book. So I'm lying on this table. I'd never had acupuncture before in my life. I'm lying on this table, and this woman, I feel like a pin cushion. I'm like, okay, I hear it's good, so I'm going with it. And she takes a needle, and she's just about to put it into this point here, and she looks at me and she goes, zing! And it was wild because I felt the energy run from my neck all the way down right to the needle. And I went, it really is energy. it felt like electricity, like, and that really that was one of the first things that opened me up. And then of course working with her and how much I healed from working with her. So learning to understand energy. And then also I've always been into movement and embodiment and so on. And then also emotional wisdom. It's like, how do we navigate? And of course, emotions are energy, right? Energy and emotion. But they deserve their own category. And and actually, Kia, I've been doing your emotional, I'm not quite sure. It's up-leveling your emotions lately that you did on Glow, I think last month or something. Because I'll tell you, coming to the book launch, it's been kind of intense. I'm like in there, what Kriyas can I do for my emotional, So, so it's like just having been doing this kind of work for a long time, it all came together. It's like, okay, I need to put this into a book. And then the other thing is just during the pandemic and after George Floyd was murdered and there was all this uprising and this new kind of awareness, like, wow, we need to wake up, and those of us who are privileged, those of us who have white skin, like I have white privilege, I don't have to do anything to get it, I just got it, and like it's time for us to kind of up level our awareness of what's going on in the world and what role we can take in that. And so that's where the pillars came from, was really diving into that. And actually Yoga Gives Back, which you introduced me to, is in the book because that's a great example of, we do yoga. Why? We do yoga so that we can be strong and resilient and confident and able to engage in the world in meaningful ways, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not just, sometimes I talk to people, it's like, are you addicted to personal growth?
God.
What are you doing in your life? So.
Well, it's essential, isn't it? It's so essential at this time. We really need to focus on growth, personal growth.
Absolutely.
We really need to take self-sovereignty, as you so eloquently speak to in the book. It's essential because we're all connected through the unified field, because we inherit so many patterns in our own field, both mentally, both emotionally, energetically, from our ancestors, from our environment, and we have to begin to discern what is us and what is not us. What is our belief, what is not our belief, and actually the courage to examine some of our beliefs. So we're not just taking them on because we can't remember even where we got them from, but it was so long ago that it's definitely what we believe. And we see a lot of that in the world right now. And so this idea of just examining self and self-study and figuring out what is ours and what is not. To me, that's a lot of sovereignty too, that is expressed. It's expressed in your book. And learning to co-create with the flow of life.
Yeah.
This is one of the pillars that you have in your book, co-creating with the flow of life. Now, we might all have a slightly different image or feeling of what that is. So please share, when you say that, what are you intending?
Thank you. That's a great question. I will say that I was not a very spiritual person. I grew up in an academic family, highly intellectual. My parents did go to church. I think mostly because they loved to sing. So they sang in the choir for many years and they liked the community, but it was never something I really resonated with. And when I was younger and when I was like at Columbia in my first book and all that, it's much more about legalities and social structure and all of that kind of stuff. And then when I left, I had this kind of awakening about, there must be something different because this isn't working for me the way I'm doing it, even though I kind of did what I wanted to do. I accomplished what I wanted to, but I was like, why am I so unhappy? And why am I sick? And that's where I started. That's when I went and met Dr. Marsha, where I was on the acupuncture table. And I just started exploring, and it really, and actually feeling the energy and working with energy is what led me to having a more spiritual orientation, because I was like, oh, it helped me realize it's like there's so much more than my conscious mind understands. There's so much more going on, and what is it? And awakened this curiosity. So for me, the flow of life is a way of talking about the cosmic energy or the universal energy that is always running to and through us. In human design, we call it the neutrino stream. That's the cosmic energy that's coming into the planet. And if you some of you might recognize this, like when you're outside on a sunny day and you're looking at the sky and there's maybe trees and you can see these drops of energy coming down. Have you ever seen that, Kia? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's these like drops of energy that are coming down into the trees. Have you ever seen that?
I see and sense more the auric field of trees, especially as I'm walking through them or I'm looking at them against the sky.
Yeah, which is massive. I mean, trees, right? I mean, this is why the cover of the book has trees on it, because trees are our ancestors, right? Yeah. Trees are our great ancestors. And so I just bring this up because it was really through the living world that I started to awaken to the flow of life. It wasn't religious, and it wasn't even in a particular wisdom tradition. I mean, I do feel like learning from you and learning in the yoga tradition, it just brought in, you know, obviously this ancient and time-tested ways of thinking about this, but a lot of it for me was the curiosity about what's going on in those trees, right? Well, the flow of life is running through the trees all the time. We think that they're stationary, but they're not. There's stuff running up and down the trunks and out, you know, they're eating light, and the magic they're eating light and transforming it into glucose. I mean, my God, like, that is so amazing when you actually stop to think about it. So that for me these are all expressions of that flow of life. They're expressions of the God force or of the universe, or, you know, we all have different names. And I think that in our time right now, we need to find the names and the ways of describing it that work for us, because you know, so many things are breaking down, and we need to find things that are empowering for us. And so I like the flow of life. I also talk about how the flow of life moves along the web of life. So if we think of the flow of life as literally like that creative intelligence, which, I mean, how can you look at the universe and not think something creative, like incredibly creative, is at work, right? When you really pay attention. And then it flows through the manifest structures that we have, like this body is a manifest structure, right? Or a tree is a manifest structure. But then there's all this energy, which is more like the flow of life. So that's kind of how I talk about it, to give us a way to just start naming some of these things that we can, like, I love when you've talked about the, I hope I'm going to say this correctly, the Hiranyagarbha, the great womb, right? Which is that unified field. Like when we go there, then we get to tap into it there. So those are that's really what I'm working with. And human design actually has a form of manifesting that's similar to like what Joe Dispenza does, but it's particularly in human design context, but it's that same kind of being able to use the power of your imagination to put yourself in an emotional state of experiencing what it is that you want. And it's powerful. And I think that this is a really important thing for all of us to be doing right now, and to be focusing on what we want instead of on what we don't want, which is what we tend to do. Well, so that, that the flow of life helps us with that, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Oh, absolutely. Establishing ourselves, holding that idea of sovereignty, connecting to a higher reality, whatever we want to call that, the unified field, the flow of life, the cosmic womb, Ishvara, as we might say in the yoga tradition. There's just so many words, but the necessity to tap into that, where we stop feeling so separate and we feel our connectedness. I really feel that in what you're saying. I'd love you to speak a little bit to the emotional wisdom. And I want to share just a tiny bit from my experience this summer. I had a injury, and I absolutely stopped everything for a little while. And I made a conscious choice to go really deep into my psyche. And I knew that I knew I was going to find things, because I'm always aware that in life's great majesty and intelligence, if we are brought to our knees, which I literally was, then there was a reason. And I had to listen, and I had to go in and see. And what I discovered in going in, with a little help from a certain book that I was reading that was talking about the 4 core emotions. One way of looking at it, of fear, of anger, of sadness, and joy. How could I forget the joy piece? But in doing that, I came to recognize that myself, and probably most of us, we push down and push away our uncomfortable emotions, especially as women. We're told, well, men as well. We're told if you're sad, then you feel like you're a liability around people, or you're too emotional, or whatever. If you're angry, God forbid you're angry, you become oh, that person who's angry. And so we squash all of these emotions, and we just don't let them come. So when you speak to emotional wisdom, taking the time to assess, to integrate, and to really tune into what's there, make space for it, it feels like one of the most essential processes that we could all go through. Because otherwise, how do we tap into our emotional intelligence? Because it's all so suppressed. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's vital that we build our capacity, and it's kind of tricky. Like when I acknowledge, it's kind of tricky, because we want to be able to feel our emotions. We want to be present to them. We want to honor them and respect them, but we also don't want them to control us. Like, we don't want them to, like, just if we take anger, right? Like, we don't want our anger to be uncontrolled. We don't want, because then people become dangerous, right? Fear also, fear and anger make people dangerous if they are not in command of it, right? If it's taking over. So we don't want that, right? And I think a lot of times, and we, again, like, we don't have a particularly an energetically or emotionally wise culture in the United States, in Western culture. So what we did instead was we learned to suppress it. But there are other options. And the thing is if we can learn to build, and this is also where the Kriyas and the energetic capacity comes in, is to have the ability that when an emotion comes in, we can actually hold on to it, not spew it out at everybody, right? But hold on to it, witness it. And I like to say, rather than suppress, you sequester.
Ooh.
So you say, okay, that's potent. I'm not quite in a situation where I can really give my full attention to it. I'm going to sequester it until I have the time, or I have the energy, or it's appropriate. I'm in a meeting, or I'm having a conversation, whatever, right? And somebody said, and I got triggered, and I'm like, okay. So you want to hold it, but then, and you're really great about teaching this kid, is you want to come back to it and be like, okay, so how did the day go? How did that feel? What do I need to pay attention to? Is there something I need to understand about myself? Are there any amends I need to make to myself or others? Like, just that self-inquiry, right? And so that's why, so we sequester it until we have a time where we can really pay attention to it. That, or depending on how strong it is also, because if you just ground yourself and you breathe, even just a few long, deep breaths in a situation, a lot of times an emotion will move. Jill Bolte Taylor, who is a neuroanatomist, she talks about how emotional energy, if it's not kind of grabbed onto with a belief system or a judgment or something like that, will move in 90 seconds.
Yeah. So all those emotions, otherwise, they're just stories, stories, and stories, and what we call, right, in yoga, the 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 mental emotional impressions, the grooves that are so activated, then it's hard to separate from them. And then we really become enslaved to those emotions.
Mhm.
And to me, what you describe and get to in the book so beautifully is that emotional wisdom is an incredible force that we have. It's an intelligence, and it
Yes.
never lies. And so if we can just tap in, without all of the stories that are on top, and be present with an emotion, it's reflecting a certain truth to us in that moment. And that's
Mhm.
what I
Well,
realized
it's
for
a lot of
my
times later,
layers.
right?
Yeah. Like
Mhm.
fear is coming up because it's telling us that there's something we need to be alert to. It's away.
Mhm.
It's bringing energy to us. It's clearing the brain. It's opening us, right, to perceive a little bit better. When anger comes up, it's alerting us. Somebody crossed a boundary we had. We weren't heard. We feel threatened in some way. To be
Mhm.
able to respond in the moment to that. But I know for myself, those were really hard because there were too many layers of suppressed emotion. And so then the clarity of that which is coming up in the moment is all clouded by the past. So you're
Mhm.
not getting a pure hit about what it is now. No wonder we walk around with so much confusion,
Yeah,
right?
I know. I know, right. And most of the time, not always, but many times when we do have something that comes up in the present, it's stimulating a trauma imprint that we have from some time, maybe when we were very little or, earlier in our lives. And because we really haven't developed a good practices like in the West for knowing how to work with trauma.
Yeah,
And we're getting much better at it. I mean, the last 10, 15 years, the understanding of trauma has really developed a lot. But historically, we're not really very good at that. And another reason why the Kriyas are so great, because they help us to move that energy. And one of the things I love about it is that we don't have to go and remember what happened. We need to ideally kind of feel where the energy is in our bodies so that we can be like, okay, there it is. I want to move it. I'm going to do some breath of fire to move it, or, whatever practice we decided to use. But, but yeah, it's like if we don't work with those stored memories, I believe they can, create real problems in the physical body, right? They can
yeah,
make you uncomfortable for one thing, but they can even create illness because of so much trapped, stored energy that isn't moving,
yeah,
right? And then, over time, it gets denser and denser and denser, and it can even become physical. So it's really behooves us to learn how to work with these layers of our energy. And really, when you take it on as a project, you can make a lot of headway in a relatively short period of time. I think that a lot of times people don't want to start because they're afraid. And I know I had this at one point in my life, that if I actually started to work with my emotions, that I would drown in my emotions. Like the well of sadness was so deep that I was never going to come out. And I think a lot of people feel that way, some version of that for themselves. So then they're like, oh no, I can't. It's like the Pandora's box. So I want to just say to all of you that you actually can move through them um, more quickly than you might think, and particularly with the tools that you get from Kia and from this tradition.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, and you so beautifully direct people to their daily date with the divine in your book. And first of all, I just want to say I really encourage you guys to buy this book because there's so much wisdom, uh, and it's so practically oriented to you cultivating a next level of self-liberation, self-sovereignty, self-liberation. And this daily date with the divine is just that. It's taking time to practice every day, to move your energy, to connect with yourself, to become more aware, more alert, and continuously on this path of self-reflection and self-correction. And life's always going to keep challenging us. That's just not going to change. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just means that the more you're practicing, the more you're working on yourself, the quicker you negotiate and navigate the change and the challenge that you're facing. The less enmeshed you get in it, the more skillful, the more adaptable you become, and the more trusting in yourself. Because for me, that trust in self that comes when you find your sovereignty, when you start to tap into the feeling of the support of the unseen intelligence of life, when you get to know your emotional being and also trust your emotional being. I mean, this is a really powerful place. It's a powerful place, and you then speak to, it's like you're taking people through a process in your book. You then speak to this idea of spiraling outward, like the purpose-driven life. So can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just putting the URL in here if you guys do check it out. There we go. Yeah, it's femininesovereigntybook.com, and this is what it looks like, and it just released today. And I'll just say that we've already hit #1 seller in 2 categories.
Yes.
And we're on a new release in women's studies history, which I think is awesome. Anyway, well, so done. I'm excited about that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, so you were asking about purpose, right? And about the purpose piece.
Yes,
and,
the spiraling. You speak to it as the spiraling outward. It's sort of like the spiraling in as we're in our, connecting to self, to source, and then the natural spiraling outward that occurs once we've like fully embodied.
Yeah, exactly. And that I think is really, like I was saying before, like yoga it's here for us to build, build our inner landscape so that we can be, we can walk through the world, as you would say, as an elevated being, right? Like we work with our energy so that we can have a higher frequency, and that really helps others. So in one sense, that's a purpose in and of itself, right?
Exactly.
Is to elevate one's energy and to have it as consistent, I know for me, one of the big things has been raising the bottom of my frequency, right? I'm like, I don't want it to go below a certain, like, we're always going to have, ups and downs. It's just going to happen. But how high can I have my baseline? So that's one thing I think about. But in terms of purpose, I think that purpose, I talk about it more as looking for a feeling of being on purpose rather than looking for your life purpose.
Yes.
I think there are people who, like my dad, and I wrote about him in the book, he's somebody who knew what his purpose was his entire life. And he just lived that way. Whereas my mom, who was a kind of 50s mom and housewife and everything, had a feminist awakening in the 70s, and her whole life purpose completely changed. And I don't want to say, and I don't think she would have ever said that her role as a mom was not her life purpose. That was absolutely, she felt very on purpose of that for a long time, until it wasn't. Yeah. Until something else came out, until some awakening was happening on the planet and she was a part of it. And then what brought her purpose changed. And I think that that's happening to a lot of us right now, right? Like our world is, pretty tumultuous. And there's a lot that we're being called to pay attention to, and a lot that we want to help to elevate in our world. And so it may be that I know, like, earlier in my life, I probably had a different thing I was engaging in where I felt on purpose. It's changed over the years. So I just want to say, for those of you who maybe have been like, because I'll say, doing human design, lots of people come to me, they think I can tell them what their purpose is. And I'm like, I'll read the chart, we'll talk, we'll work together, but I'm always saying, you are in charge of your purpose. Yeah. You are in charge of your soul. You're in charge of your life. I may be a human design expert, but you're the expert. But let's unpack what gives you that feeling. And I love this definition of enthusiasm, because I think enthusiasm is a key indicator that you're feeling on purpose, which is that it makes the God within you dance. That's what enthusiasm is. The God within you is dancing. So that's kind of the feeling that you want when you're looking for what makes me feel on purpose.
Yes.
It's not like a thing. It's not like an activity necessarily, right? It's more about what's your relationship to how you're engaging with life. Where are you directing your pranic force, right? Where are you putting your energy out into the world, and how does that make you feel? Like, to me, that's really what purpose is about. And then it's twin is contribution. Contribution is the thing you do, right? It's the way, like this book, for me, this is my contribution, right? This is my contribution. Writing this book, I felt on purpose. Bringing this work out into the world, in my body, the God is dancing inside, right? Because I feel on purpose, but this is my contribution. So we all have contributions to make. It may not be a book, right? I mean, I've been a scholar forever, so it makes sense that I would write a book.
Yes.
And I have a friend I was talking to about my book recently, and I just kind of shared with her, and she said, well, my contribution is I teach kindergartners how to really grow into the people they can become. And I was like, that's an awesome contribution, right? Really, I mean, teachers, especially of kindergartners, are the unsung heroes of our world.
Yeah.
People who really work with kids. So there's lots of different ways and lots of different things you can do as you're engaging with life that can make you feel on purpose. And it doesn't have to just be one thing. But to me, when you have that quality of enthusiasm, that's a very high frequency, right? You can't, like, if you really have that going on, you don't get mad. You don't, you're not in fear. You're in a high state of possibility. And to me, that's a lot of what we need right now, because we need solutions to what's going on in our world that we've never seen before. And how do we do that? Do that by being able to tap in and really receive guidance from that creative intelligence, which we can call intuition or divine guidance or imagination.
I love that, Maggie. And sort of along these lines that you're speaking now, what we're witnessing, and we've been witnessing now for some years, is a war of communication. People not really listening to one another, people not being able to listen, feeling so confronted in their own ideas of right and wrong that they're not able to hold space for another person's perception of right and wrong. And it's creating so much pain. It's pain upon pain upon pain upon pain. And so I'd love to hear your perception on, conscious communication, because you reference communication that connects in your book.
Yeah.
And if you just joined, we're speaking about feminine sovereignty, Maggie Ostara's new book that just launched today. Highly, highly recommend you go buy it. Feminine, for some reason that's a hard word to say today. FeminineSovereignty.com.
Yeah. Feminine Sovereignty book.com.
Thank you. Feminine Sovereignty book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll also just say that if you get it today, the Kindle is free today. And then you can get the paperback if you choose, or you can get both actually. And then you also get gifted into a 3-session masterclass with me called Take Command of Your Life with Feminine Sovereignty. So it's just a way, because I love to meet my readers, I love to meet my people, not just talk to them this way. I mean, this is good too, but you know what I mean.
Of course I
Meet the
do. Of
people.
course I do. It's
Yes.
all about that. Yes.
You want to meet people. So, but you were asking about communication that connects. It's really the twin of emotional wisdom.
Yeah.
Because we need, and this is why in the structure of the book, we spiral in, we spiral out, but we also know we're going to have to spiral back in again, right? Because as we spiral out and we start communicating with someone, a lot of times we can get triggered, right? Or it can just, and especially if we're trying to communicate with people that we don't necessarily always agree with, right? Or we have really different historical backgrounds, or we have different levels of privilege, or we come from different religious backgrounds or national origin backgrounds. I mean, whatever it is, we have so much diversity in our world. And the way that many of us have really developed our sense of safety is by trying to be with people who are like us. We want to just be with people who we feel like, oh, we're similar. And there is something lovely about that, right? But if we do that, then we don't necessarily have the capacity to be like, well, how do I communicate with people who aren't like me? Who maybe have a different point of view, who maybe would challenge some of the things that I believe, whose maybe life experience really makes me be like, wow, I never even thought about that, right? And so as we're expanding outside of what we might think of as our close-in people that we feel super comfortable and aligned with, to connect with others, and this, we really need to do this in our world today, right? It's like we have to get this piece that we are in it together. We are one. We are part of the same creative intelligence, right? Because otherwise we have war. Right? We have war and we have coercion. We have all kinds of things. So that communication that connects is about how do we work with our inner landscape so that if we do get triggered, we know what to do, which was we were talking about before. But then also, how do we develop our compassion, right? Our compassion and our ability to hold space for other people, even when we don't agree with them, to try to be like, wow, what it would be like for me to walk a few days in this person's shoes. What would that be like? And to have compassion for them, even when you disagree with them. The thing is, and I love what, in nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, one of the key brilliances that he offers is you don't have to agree with somebody to listen to them.
Exactly.
To really take in what's going on for them and try to understand. Right? And so that's what communication that connects is. I mean, that's a key piece that it's based on, is how can we step outside of our own kind of ego structure to be like, wow, let me take in that person's experience. And what happens when everyone can do that, whether it's two people talking or in a larger group, because there's different aspects in the book about working with groups also, is we then create a shared understanding that is bigger than any one of us has. And I would say also than any one tribe has, right? And so we start to be able to like, oh, okay, so people who have this kind of background, who have this kind of purpose, feel this way, right? And then there's people who are like this. But if we can start to really understand, then we can build a bigger perspective that includes all of them. And I give an example in the book, which had to do with me being in a relationship with someone where we just got really polarized, could not hear each other at all, and our relationship fell apart. And we eventually had some mediation where this person was just really good at helping each person express their own point of view, and the other person just listened. And I learned things about that person I had never heard before. And the same was true for him. And by the time we got to the end of that, we were both like, wow, this is really different than either one of us thought. Isn't it? It's like, yes, right? And so something else. And now he and I are good. Everything's good with us, right? So the healing possibility of being able to really listen and take in,
Ooh.
not to make yourself wrong if you disagree or make them wrong, but just to be like, wow, how can we just connect with each other?
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
Maggie, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's so necessary in today's world. It's so necessary. I love when you spoke about building a greater reality, when you
Mhm.
have that understanding of where somebody else is coming from, because how do we become inclusive?
Mhm.
And then the more we do that, the less people feel the need to have to fight and shout to be heard or grip and hold. And so, wow, so powerful.
Well, and the more that we can realize that our perception as well as our memory is always highly selective, you know, highly selective, which I go into a lot in the book, is being able to identify our filters, like the kind of default way that we think about life, or we think about whatever. We think about men, we think about women, we think about whatever, this political party or people who come from that place, or, just our filters, so that we can become more aware, because we make so many snap judgments
Yes.
from our unconscious understanding of things. And so it's about being able to slow down and be like, okay, wait a minute, what am I thinking? And what am I thinking about that person? And where did that come from? And is it true?
Yeah.
Like, right? Just like stop for a minute and unpack it so that something new can emerge. Like, I feel like that's one of the, oh, thank you, Heart's Fate Wellness. You just ordered it. Yay. I think that's one of the big things that we need right now, is just to keep opening space, opening possibility, right? Open up space around this so that we can breathe in here. And then that mystery, that creative intelligence, that flow of life has a way to come in and help us, so that all of a sudden you have this epiphany about this person. You're like, I never thought about them that way before. Now all of a sudden I see them differently, right? Because we were able to get, because of course that flow of life knows that we're all one, and is like, y'all are fighting with each other, but you could do something else.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
And for that, we need to open up. We need,
Oh, wow, Maggie. So beautifully put. So beautifully put. I just want to check in here with those of you who are with us and see if anybody has any questions for Maggie based on that. I think some of you said that you've already purchased the book, which is amazing.
yay.
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 So,
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. And also, I'm over at Sovereignty by Design on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram though. I'm kind of a YouTuber to YouTube. I have a big YouTube channel, so it's mostly human design right now, human design related, but there's more and more feminine sovereignty, and there are a bunch of Kriyas also. So that's just
fantastic.
on YouTube. So if people want to find me too, if they want to see anything else.
Nice job, Maggie. I love that. Yeah. Well, this is a very in-depth book, you guys, and a wonderful combination of your personal story threaded through there, which really, I think, adds the humanity dimension to it, right? So one can put oneself in a different perspective just whilst reading. I think that's what I felt as I was reading those sections. And then also lots of self-assessment exercises. Can you just give us an example of a self-assessment exercise that you might invite somebody to do?
Yeah, every one of the pillars has a section at the end that's called Your Turn.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like this. And in those sections, there's a self-assessment, there's the spectrum of expression that has to do with different ways of expressing power, and then lots of questions for you to kind of dive into. So for example, this is is from 6, right? Yeah. Yeah. This is actually from Communication That Connects. So in the self-assessment, we're looking at, are you really awakened and empowered around this? Like, have you already developed skills in this area? So, for example, and it says you can pick these ones if you feel like, oh yeah, that resonates for me. So skills and capacities that are already developed. I feel confident, clear, and comfortable expressing what's true for me without trying to convince anyone. Or I'm curious about other people's points of view, even when I don't agree with them. I listen and take in what they have to say, and I'm open to being influenced by what they share. I discern when it's the right time for me to speak up and when it's better for me to listen or to leave. I'm able to hold on to what I have to share until I have a receptive listener audience. This is such a huge teaching. It is about, because, you know, Western culture teaches us to kind of try to get in there and express ourselves and get our point of view across and convince people and get people to agree. Like, that's how I was trained. And it's so different to be like, is this the right time? Are people receptive? Is it the right situation, or is it the proverbial, you know, throwing pearls before swine, right? And sometimes we do that. So sometimes it's better just to be a listener, and then keep your golden pearls of wisdom for when people really are going to hear them. Because there's so much pain, I think, that we can feel when we express ourselves and offer our wisdom, and we feel like it just land like it's crickets. So, and then the last one here is, I modulate the ways in which I speak so that others can hear and take in what I'm saying, especially when I sense disagreement or conflict is possible. Sometimes this requires that I carefully craft what I have to say while also maintaining the essence of my message. So it's about developing that capacity. It's discerning, right? That discernment. What is the right thing for me to say right here? Like, I might, especially if I have a reaction, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then some of the wounds or lack of capacity. So you would see like, oh, which ones are they? Oh, yeah, that's me. No one hears me when I speak up. It's like I'm not even there. I feel invisible. Ooh, ouch. I have felt that in my life for sure. I find it difficult to say what's true for me. Sometimes I don't know what that is, and at others, I can't find the words. I get tongue-tied. I'm afraid of other people's reaction, so I try to say what I think they want to hear. That way we can get along and avoid.
Yep.
When someone is talking, sometimes I miss what they're saying because I'm preparing what I'm going to say when I get a chance to get a word in edgewise. Be honest with yourself. How often have you done that one, right?
Yep.
And then I find it impossible to listen to someone talk about something I disagree with. I shut my ears or I interrupt to talk over them. Being right and having the last word are important to me in these situations, right? And so much of this is the way we've been conditioned, right? These lack of capacity or wounds. So basically you get to do an assessment like this after every pillar, and then then there's a whole part about what does the awakened and empowered expression look like? What is the shadow expression? And so, and then that's followed by questions that help you to just kind of go, wow, yeah, that's true for me. And what do I think about it now?
Yeah.
Right? And this is all, like you said earlier, in the spirit of, self-awareness. And then do we need to do I want to keep giving my life force to my conditioning, this conditioning that I consciously know is not how I want to behave? Do I want to do that? And then there are the steps, right? But you have to become aware first. So that's what this whole part about your turn is becoming aware. Like, how does this relate to me?
Yeah. Maggie, it's so important. And I don't think there's any greater work right now, to be honest, than this level of radical self-honesty, really being willing to ask ourselves the uncomfortable questions, not assuming that we are skillful in our communication, because so many of us think we are, but when it gets down to it, we're actually not so skillful. We're still running those old programs. We're still repeating the known and not able to step out. And as you beautifully put earlier, be able to open ourselves to receive information that's coming from an entirely different place that is actually connected to the kind of unity consciousness and peace and harmony that we all crave on that deep level.
Yeah.
And so we have to make space for it. And the only way we're going to make space for it is to keep doing this work. I think that's the key. So many of us, we've done some of the work, but there's so much more. There's so much refinement that can happen. There's this great term, you know, in yoga called this idea of correcting your intellect. We have to correct the way we're perceiving things.
Exactly.
We have to make a conscious choice. Otherwise, we'll be making the unconscious choices. And this is the work. And so what do? We raise our energy. We create coherence through the yogic practices. We learn to start to take control of our mind, so it's not spreading our attention all over the place and dispersing our energy. And we begin to assess, how really am I doing in my life? Am I living in integrity with what I truly feel? Am I communicating well? What's deeply meaningful to me? How do I get to that? So it's not I'm not going through the paces of life. And I think for me, I've always had this fear of normalcy. You know, until I really stepped on the yogic path, all I knew was that I didn't want to be what I perceived to be a normal person. And when I really delved into yoga, I got to understand that what I was wanting to not be was caught in the ancestral karma, caught in that web of unconscious behavior. And once I started to tap in and understand that, it really added so much fuel to my desire to step out of it. And I think we all want to access that whatever the fuel is for you that helps you to embark on a whole new level of relationship to self, to other, to the world. And to me, the value in this book is vast, because you've digested, you've assimilated, you're working within a greater context of the human design and of yoga to help somebody to go systematically through this process. And I think that that's the kind of guidebook that is needed right now, something that can take us systematically along a path of self-illumination. So thank you for writing this, and for
yeah. And when we have more self-illumination, the world looks very different.
Yeah, exactly.
And how we engage with it, and what our purpose is, and our contribution, and how we communicate with each other and collaborate with each other is totally different, because it's a new foundation.
Yeah.
And you know, I really believe we were all born here at this time because we're here to be wayshowers through, like I remember you saying, I don't know, one of our trainings, something about how in the yoga tradition they say we're coming out of this dark age, right, that we've been in. And but it's also important for us to remember that the flow of life works through each one of us, right? It's not like it's somewhere else. It's us. We're here to be the agents of that creative intelligence that can help us to move into the new world that I know a lot of us are actively creating in our own lives in different ways, but that we really want to see come in with our whole world, so that we have a beautiful world to leave to future generations. Yeah, and
So,
a living world that's vibrant that we're a part of. And so, yeah, I think this is very much a book about that. And I just thank you, Kia, so much. You've been such a inspiration for me, and a teacher. And like I don't know if I would have been able to write this book without all the yoga and all the stuff that I've learned from you. I mean, I would have written a different book, obviously, but just saying that the practices enabled me, for example, to get through the pandemic, you know, and through these big things that we've been through and we keep going through. So I'm very, really grateful for that.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you, everybody who's tuning in either now or the future now. It's still now, whenever you're tuning
It'll always
in.
be now.
To the eternal now, we'll be here. And please do check out Maggie's book, femininesovereigntybook.com.
Get your bonuses today.
Perfect.
And I would love to meet you if this resonates for you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Sending you so much love.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.